Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court redefined the traditional understanding of sex as the biological differences between male and female. In its place, the justices decided that sex now includes sexual orientation, transgender, or anything else they want it to mean. The latest ruling keeps pace with a string of rulings redefining everything that went before. First, Griswold v. Connecticut redefined privacy and gave us contraception. Then Roe v. Wade redefined life and gave us abortion. Next, Planned Parenthood versus Casey redefined liberty. And in 2015, Obergefell versus Hodges redefined marriage. And now, Bostock versus Clayton has redefined sex. First, there's a deep danger here for people, religious people, who live their lives by the actual meanings of these words. With every assault on the meaning of words, the principles behind those words are more and more jeopardized to the point of being made criminal. We're at that tipping point now, so to speak. The ruling sets up a clash between the so-called civil rights of gays and transsexuals against the First Amendment rights of religious believers. The coming showdown was more than hinted at by Justice Neil Gorsuch, who flat out shocked conservatives by siding with liberals in the advancing of the homosexual agenda when he wrote in the majority opinion, quote, "How these doctrines protecting religious liberty interact with Title VII are questions for future cases, too." Closed quote. The future and perhaps final battle is now set. At a future court, short of some stunning turnaround or raft of new appointments, will declare personal religious beliefs, however sincere, cannot override civil rights to have sex with whoever a person wants, whenever they want, under whatever circumstances they want, and being employed by whoever they choose to work for. For the moment, let's shift from future considerations and ask the simple question of how we got here. Well, there's been a cultural shift, a seismic cultural shift in how Americans view, first of all, sexual morality itself. It started slowly, as all things do, in the 1960s with contraception, and 2 to 3 generations later has declared sodomy a constitutional right and now stands on the precipice of declaring opposition to any of it criminal. We're just one step away from that, so know that is what's coming. The culture was originally pushed into the abyss of sexual immorality in the 1960s as a result of Protestant thought, which accepted contraception, divorce, and remarriage. But once the majority began its embrace, the majority of the population began its embrace of all of that, a crisis moment came for the U.S. Catholic bishops. They could resist or they could fold. They chose to fold, and the dam exploded in 1968 when many either would not defend or actually joined in the revolution against Pope Paul VI encyclical reasserting the Church's 2,000-year condemnation of birth control. The aspect of this drama many pew-sitting Catholics did not realize at the time is that a quiet invasion of homosexual men into the Catholic priesthood and religious orders had already begun. These are the men who would advance into positions of leadership over the next decades, who would either make a career out of raping teenage boys by the thousands, or covering it all up, or in some cases, both. While they weren't raping or abusing their authority, they were weaponizing their power to pervert doctrine and to fashion a church in their own image, meaning gay. For years, decades, men who were heterosexual were blocked from getting into or actively hunted down and kicked out of seminary, while active homosexuals gained acceptance left, right, and center. Large number of these homosexuals were active, as were their bishops and formators. They were sent into parishes and began subtly crafting the church's teaching on loving one's neighbor to mean accepting sin, and of course never judge anything. Each Sunday, millions and millions of Mass-going Catholics had it drummed into their heads week after week that they should never judge anything. Of course, this was being sold to them by active sodomite clergy who wanted to create an atmosphere where they would never be judged and their own personal sin would be accepted if it was ever made public. In short, these men entered the priesthood and used it to pave the way to corrupt the minds of the sheep into accepting homosexuality in the name of loving their neighbor. The collapse of a Catholic defense was instrumental in the broader cultural effort of advancing the gay agenda. With the church effectively neutralized at best and severely compromised at worst by infiltrators, nothing stood in the way of leading society off the cliff. Thousands, tens of thousands of gay men destroyed the priesthood and cleared the way for all of this we see going on right now. This was and is known to loads of bishops, many of whom themselves are gay, not to mention homo predators who have been part and parcel of this filth. So it is with some caution that faithful Catholics approach a statement in response to the Supreme Court ruling issued by L.A. Archbishop Jose Gomez, who is current president of the nation's bishops' conference. He said in response to Monday's ruling, quote, "By erasing the beautiful differences and complementary relationship between man and woman, we ignore the glory of God's creation and harm the human family, the first building block of our society. Our sex, whether we are male or female, is part of God's plan for creation and for our lives." Closed quote. Well, it's a good answer. Now, forgive faithful Catholics if we view your effort, Archbishop, here as some sort of supreme hypocrisy. For half a century, bishops up and down the U.S. hierarchy have at the very least turned a blind eye to this rot within their own ranks. They have actually advanced practicing homosexual clergy within their own dioceses, and they have set these wolves loose on their own flocks. They have refused to kick out the doctrinal perverts from within their parishes. This has been the case for decades, and as a point of order, remember that more than 80% of all the cases, those thousands and thousands and thousands of cases of sex abuse, were inflicted on physically mature teenage boys by homosexual men in collars, and they still did nothing. And even in the case of Gomez himself, that hypocrite continues to allow the likes of James Martin and Brian Massengale to speak at the Religious Education Congress, where they promote homosexuality, transgenderism, and same-sex marriage openly. Church Militant knows for a fact that Gomez knows, because we know this because we approached him personally in the hallway of the conference center at one of the congresses a couple years back and said flat out that heresy was being preached from the stage of his conference. We told him exactly what it was. He deliberately looked puzzled, and then was ushered away by his secretary and did nothing to correct the problem. A year or two later, James Martin enjoyed a place of prominence on the speakers list, as he does every year now. When you talk privately with many of the bishops, you come to learn that many of them have a soft spot for this issue, even the 2 or 3 who aren't gay, because they went to seminary with these guys and developed friendships with them. There is, of course, also the strong suggestion by those who know that many of today's bishops were, at one time, hopping in and out of SAC with the other guys in seminary during their time in seminary, or maybe even in rectories. They may have had a change of heart and come back to what we call the side of the angels, but nevertheless, they were forever compromised and fear if they move against that gay cabal, they will be outed for their own pasts. There are a host of reasons, a wide spectrum, why various priests and bishops would either be supportive or silent in the face of the perversion of the church's teachings, but the individual reasons as they apply to individual bishops don't matter. They can each answer to God at their judgments for allowing the perversion to happen and the resulting destruction of souls. Our point here today is it was leaders in the church that set the stage for that Supreme Court ruling this past Monday. And it is the few remaining Catholics who survived their filth who will now have to pay the price. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.